Uh, what do you know about Cuba? What do you know about Cuba?
Sir, it's a Spanish speaking country.
One, so you know that it's a Spanish-speaking territory. Yes, please. What else you know about Cuba?
They have a great medical program.
They have a great medical program. That's correct.
The
Anything else?
capital, the capital is Havana.
The capital of Cuba is Havana. Very good. Go ahead for me, Prendergast.
Sir, is located in the northern Caribbean.
Located in the Northern Caribbean. Salmon.
Sir, it's a dictatorship.
So dictatorship. What's dictatorship? The government.
Yes, sir.
All right. What else you know about Cuba? Go ahead for me, Jennings.
They speak Spanish.
They speak Spanish. So I'm going to show you a small clip. It's 13 minutes. And it's going to give you an overview of Cuba. Right, Cuba? Today, where it is here. Just a small overview of Cuba, and you'll see if it's raining. You'll see if you actually would like to visit there. Anybody has ever visited Cuba in the class before? No? Campbell has something to say?
Oh no, sir. When you were asking what we knew about Cuba, I was going to say that I know that the U.S. had new restrictions on Americans going there.
That is true, yes. So there's restrictions on American going there. All right, so let us see what's up with Cuba.
It's only 93 miles from Florida and just 13 from the Bahamas. But like the smoke that coils from its legendary cigars, the Republic of Cuba exists in the time and space all its own. Blending the traditions of Spain, Africa, and its native peoples, and lit by the fires of independence and revolution, the aromas, textures, and flavors of this Caribbean nation are like no other. Despite its size, Cuba has punched well above its weight. For centuries, its vast plantations satisfied a global appetite for sugar and thirst for the smoothest rums. In 1962, it played center stage in a nuclear standoff, which made the planet hold its breath for 13 days. And through it all, its infectious rhythms taught the world how to move its hips. Few cities can stir the imagination like Cuba's capital, Havana, a city preserved by forts and citadels, a 5-mile seawall, and an imposed embargo which held back the excesses of the 20th century for over 50 years. Havana's symbol is La Giradilla, dedicated to the city's first female governor, who scanned the horizon each day for her husband's return from the sea. 400 years later, she continues to wait high above the Castillo de la Real Fuerza, the city's original fort. While her husband never returned from his explorations, today she watches as millions of travelers come to explore her city. The fort overlooks Plaza De Armas, the birthplace and heart of Old Havana. Step into the cool colonial elegance of the Palace of the Captains General, once home of governors, today the home of the Museum of the City of Havana. browse the vintage books and posters in Plaza De Armas. Take the short walk to the Plaza de la Cathedral, where fortunes are told and salsa spills from beneath the arches. Made from blocks of coral cut from the ocean floor, the Cathedral of St. Christopher is a Cuban Baroque masterpiece that has been called music set in stone. For 100 years was also the resting place of Columbus, who claimed the fertile lands for Spain in 1492. Another of the old town squares is Plaza De San Francisco, which has changed little since the days when the crews of passing galleons filled their barrels at the Fountain of the Lions. A more recent addition to the square is La Conversación, a statue that reminds us to keep the need for dialogue in contemporary society. Cubans, however, need little reminding of the importance of such simple pleasures. In a world where our heads are increasingly bowed to the smartphone, this is a city where people still walk with their heads held high. There's something truly liberating walking these advertisement and franchise-free streets where you can be open to millions of unguarded moments, like the curbside battles of wits, the characters, the melancholy of peeling paint, and the promise of a new coat. One place that will never see a paintbrush is La Bodeguita del Medio. Enjoy a mojito and add your name to the thousands of others which adorn every surface of this iconic bar. Getting around the city is easy. Simply walk, catch a bus, or cruise in style. Havana is home to thousands of classic autos from a golden age, which, just like the city, only becomes more alluring with each passing year. Head west, and you'll soon see the majestic dome, El Capitolio, rise over central Havana. The streets here are lined with some of Havana's finest architectural treasures, such as the Great Theater of Havana and the National Museum of Fine Arts.
In the sunshine, keeping the one love of life,
Just a little further to the west, discover the Vidado District, a mix of fabulous 1950s modernist buildings and neoclassical mansions patiently awaiting restoration. Explore the markets, then join ice cream-loving locals at Copilia, Havana's futuristic temple to the multi-scoop. The Vidado is also home to the University of Havana, a hotbed of inquiry and dissent for almost 300 years. And the iconic National Hotel, where the likes of Winston Churchill, Rita Hayworth, and Leonardo DiCaprio have spent many a Cuban night. While the streets of Havana give the city its pulse, it's on the Malecón where you'll find its soul. Extending for miles along Havana's northern shores, this is where the city comes to meet, romance, and dream, and perhaps catch a little dinner. At the Malecón's eastern end, look out across the mouth of the Havana harbor, from Fort San Salvador to its big brother, Morro Castle. For centuries, these two guardians were linked by a giant chain, which could be pulled tight to keep marauding ships at bay. While you're near the Malecón's eastern end, visit the Museum of the Revolution, housed in the former presidential palace of deposed dictator Batista. The museum is a dedication to those who took part in the long march to a free Cuban homeland. You'll find tributes to Cuba's political heroes all over Havana. But there is none greater than the Plaza de la Revolución, where more than 1 million Cubans can gather at a time. Towering over the square is the memorial to José Martí, the poet, writer, and lightning rod for Cuban independence. Pay your respects to Cubans, great and small, at Cologne Cemetery, a city within a city containing over 500 mausoleums. From generals to chess champions to the poor, I walk through these 57 hectares. It's a walk through Cuban history. Another city within this city is Fusterlandia, where for more than 30 years, the wild imagination of artist Jose Fuster has exploded from the confines of his studio and into the neighborhood streets, walls, and rooftops of Jaimanitas. Havana has long been a magnet for creative minds. On Havana's outskirts, high on a shady hilltop, sits the former Cuban residence of Ernest Hemingway. Peer into the rooms where the Nobel laureate lived for 20 years, writing classics such as The Old Man and the Sea. The home was a gift to the people of Cuba and remains much as it was the day Hemingway left his beloved island forever in 1960. When the sun gets low and the city takes on its beckoning glow, why not head back downtown and order a daiquiri at El Floridita, just as El Papa did after a long day at the typewriter. Then, let Havana's magical rhythms carry you into the night. Havana's lure can be hard to resist, but Cuba offers so much more beyond the seductive lights of its capital. In Cuba, a long sandy beach and a cool breeze is never far away. Just 12 miles from Havana's downtown, the eastern beaches unroll towards the town of Matanzas, the birthplace of the rumba, and Cardenas, where in 1850 the Cuban flag flew for the very first time. From here, follow the scent of fresh lime, rum, and suntan lotion north to one of Latin America's premier resorts, Varadero. This long sandy peninsula is famed for its natural attractions as well as its resorts. Be sure to take a walk in the Avariacacos Ecological Reserve and experience the subterranean world of the Cueva de Ambrosio. Then, cool off in the pure, crystal waters of nearby Cueva Saturno. After exploring the northern coastline, turn south towards Cuba's heartland. Santa Clara is Cuba's most revolutionary city. Here, in 1958, Che Guevara and 18 fellow rebels took on an armored government train with a bulldozer and Molotov cocktails and won. The Battle of Santa Clara brought an end to the revolution and cleared the way for a new president, Fidel Castro, who would steer Cuba's course for the next 50 years. But this city will always belong to Che. He is everywhere, watching over the city from his mausoleum, from the streets, from the very walls, extolling us to remember that liberators do not exist. The people liberate themselves. From a city forged by revolution to one built on sugar, welcome to Trinidad. In the early 1800s, this was the sugar capital of the world. Here, plantation owners poured vast fortunes into plazas, churches, and Spanish colonial mansions filled with the best furnishings money could buy. Just a few miles from Trinidad, climb Manaca Ixnaga Tower for views across the Valle de los Ingenios. Here, for as far as the eye can see, thousands of workers once cut sugarcane, while more than 50 mills squeezed out its sweet liquid gold. Trinidad is surrounded by other riches too. Relax on southern Cuba's finest stretch of sand, Playa Ancon. Then follow the rural back roads that lead to the cool heights of the Sierra de Escambre. In Cienfuegos, the mood changes from Spanish to something a little more Parisian. This is the only Cuban city founded by the French, and it shows. There is an unmistakable elegance here. in the spacious avenues around Jose Marti Park, to the theater where Caruso once brought opera lovers to tears. You'll find it amid the lavish dining room and rooftop terrace of the Palacio de Valle, and in the seaside homes of Punta Gorda. And when it's time to experience nature's elegance, you'll find plenty nearby in the bird life of Laguna Guanaroca and in the afternoon light of Rancho Luna Beach. After exploring Cienfuegos, why not just keep going? Because there's so much more to discover in this country, which opens to the world more each day. Sometimes it's hard to know whether Cuba is awakening to the world or if the world is awakening to Cuba. Whatever your politics, it's easy to admire this island nation that has proudly gone its own way. Cuba may still have one foot firmly in the past, but as the world tumbles forward into tomorrow, we can be thankful for the many things it has not let go.
All right, ladies. From watching this video on Cuba, what did you have any preconceived notion before, right? And you need to tell me what are those preconceived notions about Cuba, things that you thought Cuba was, right? And after you watch the video, have anything changed? Any form of enlightenment?
I like the resources, resorts,
The resorts? What about the resorts?
and the beaches. It look elegant and just nice, and it makes me want to visit Cuba more.
Yes,
It's
all right.
interesting, and the vehicles.
The vehicles. Anyone else? Any notion you had about Cuba? Go ahead for me, Dunkley.
So, sir, I just didn't really know how Cuba looked before. I just I knew about Cuba. I didn't really know how it looked. But after watching that video, sir, it made me fall in love with Cuba. So now I want to go to Cuba. It even makes me wish I was Spanish or something.
All right. Good, good. Anyone else? Someone mentioned earlier on in the class that Cuba is a dictatorship. From the video, anything look very dictatorial in it? From the video, do you see any soldiers around, any police officers manning the street, which is like pictures that we get from the Middle East? Anyone?
Sir, they had the like portrait thingy or whatever of the Chi guy on their walls. That yeah.
All right.
Sir, they had a lot of history. Like they had a lot of like their history around their towns and stuff.
Yes, that is true. Go ahead for me, Campbell.
They kept a lot of their more like they kept a lot of their historical buildings, put it that way. Like walking around, you can see a lot.
Yes, they have preserved quite a lot of their buildings, their historical buildings. That is true. That is so true in terms of the preservation of their buildings. And had it not been for COVID, we as well, our school usually go to visit Cuba, the history department visit Cuba sometime I believe 2019, but we wanted to go again, but because of COVID, we were not able to visit. But what I'm going to do is that I'm going to show you some of the pictures from our visit to Cuba. Not a lot, but is some of the students you'll be able to be familiar with. Do you know her?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. All right, let her go down here. So this is the group. This is before we left Jamaica. This small little group going to Cuba to visit. We had 3 teachers, myself, Miss, what's her name? She's from
Miss Zeke.
RE.
Zage.
Zodge,
This
and
is okay.
Mrs. Zodge, and this is Miss McFarlane. And she came with her son. This is us at the airport when we visit Cuba.
All 3 of those teachers have been our teachers.
I see a girl that's in grade probably like 8 now. That's there.
Yeah, she's in grade 8.
She's in grade 8, I believe, right now. You'll see in the video that you saw something on the streets where they would have decorated the streets for over 30 years. And so these are some of this is when we visited there.
Sir, it's really colorful.
Very colorful and beautiful, I should say.
It's not plain, like.
We went to the Jamaica embassy in Cuba, and so we took a picture of the Jamaica embassy. Crystal again.
Did you have to speak Spanish?
No. We had a tour guide that these are how they decorate some of their streets. And all of these
Sir, did you guys go shopping?
Yes, we went shopping. This was at the Jamaica
I
embassy.
was invited.
Sir, is there a U.S. embassy at Cuba?
Yes, there is.
Sir, how long did you guys spend there?
We spent a week. This is our little car that we went into a taxi. This is one of our tour guides here. This is the embassy. It was something that was out in the school. We invited everyone, but people didn't turn out. Well, we expected a lot more. This is one of their buildings.
Sir, how much was it?
It was about about 1,000 US. And
Sir, that's
Sir,
probably
how much
why people didn't turn up.
Exactly, sir.
Sir,
How much is 1,000 US, sir?
no, that is like about 100,000. Not a lot of money.
It's a lot of money. What are you talking about?
US and expect. Sir, to me, $50 is enough money, so that's saying a lot.
That is expensive.
No. Once you go to Cuba, you get food, everything there.
You
But
get
it's
food
still
for free there.
expensive.
Sir, for free. Like the value of your
Everything,
the US that you pay.
there is pretty cheap. Pretty cheap. This is when we did a little tour in the city, old Havana, and we met these ladies there. And then we tried their plantains, like plantain chips. It's harder than our plantain chips, but it tastes good. I'm not a fan of plantain.
Nice.
Yeah.
It looked like it had like a tip of salt to just. I
Yes.
want to try it.
Yes.
Was it sweet?
Yes, it was the sweet plantain. I don't know how they get it like that.
So they cut it thin. They probably
It
like
was
bake
thin.
it or something.
It was very thin.
Probably bake it instead of frying it.
Yes, this is another tour guide that she took us around the city. It was my first time seeing these old, well, you know, antique vehicles. And this drive, it's like one of their main vehicles. And also you can see that they do have modern vehicles there. So it's not just the old vehicles alone, as we'll consider. They
But I
do have
feel like I would drive the antique ones because you know that looks more cool than the modern day one. The modern day ones are like, yeah, okay.
yeah.
Melanie, imagine pulling up to school in that. That would be like,
Yes.
that would be a whole flex.
Just imagine driving around Jamaica in one. Everybody would go and want to take pictures.
Yes, sir. The modern day ones now are like, okay, everyone has that.
They're boring.
This is one here. This is we went to like a little shopping center in Cuba, and we took a picture here.
Did you guys go to any beach?
No, we never get. We went to the beach, but we didn't go into the beach
Why?
because
That would be weird.
parents didn't give us the permission to take the children to the beach.
That is
And
just sad.
this is their zoo.
Sir, I'm confused. They give you permission to take them to a whole other country, but not to the beach?
Exactly.
Yes.
Sir, Mama, go even let me go down the road too long.
No,
I'm even going to corner shop.
no,
Corner.
ladies, look at this. This is the island safari. So we drove in a bus and we went through. So we call the lions and everything was around the vehicle. It was scary, but it was scary, but it was a good experience because we don't have something like that in Jamaica. We don't have the safari experience where we do. I'm not even sure. Anybody has ever been to the zoo in what they call that place?
Sir, there's a place like we went. It was this. What was it called?
It's probably in Saint Elizabeth.
In Saint Elizabeth, yeah.
Sir, I went there. They didn't.
That's normally for trips.
Sir, I went there. They let out like the lists and stuff. They don't have you in their exhibits or like for the lions. They keep them behind a glass cage. Like they have a glass wall in front of them so that they don't come over. And like the rest of them, they have gates around them so you can't go in there.
Oh, but actually for this one, we were able to go in. We couldn't touch the animals because some of these animals are dangerous. But we were able to in the bus and the drive through. We saw zebra. Well, I saw zebra for the first time, and we have lion at our zoo here, so the lion wasn't anything to see. And then they had a lot of different species of birds and monkeys. Some of these monkeys I've seen them on TV before, but never like see them up front. This was when we went to the market, the craft market, and we purchased quite a lot of things, very cheap. In Cuba, things are very cheap. In fact, I bought a painting, which is in my house now. Let us show you the painting.
Sir, how much was the painting?
I paid 20 US for it, which is like about 3,000 Jamaican dollars for that painting.
Sir, is Cuba cheap or expensive?
Yes, it is. Yes, it is.
It's cheap.
Very cheap.
They're like how 150 Jamaican dollars is $1 American dollar. So what is it?
All right, so listen, I went there with like $100. You are seeing the painting?
Oh yes, sir. That's a
Sir,
very
that's nice.
That's
painting.
pretty.
Yeah.
I
So
would
that painting is like about right now that painting would cost maybe about like $3,000. If you convert it, it would be about 3,000 Jamaican. You're not getting this in Jamaica for $3,000. Correct?
Sir, that's $10,000 right there.
More than 10. I went to the store. I went to a paint shop the other day that do craft like this, and they bring in paintings from Cuba. And I saw a similar painting like that, and the man was selling it for 80,000. Yes. So you can see that there's a lot of highway robbery. All right. So ladies, we are now since now it's always good for you to have some form of the old Cuba, what it's like today before you delve into its history. Always good to know. One of the things about Cuba, the first thing we need to know its location. The PowerPoint is not working. So the location of Cuba. Cuba is close to Jamaica. It's south of Cuba is north of Jamaica, and if you look right here, the capital city here is Havana, which is located here. San Diego de Cuba, another big city in Cuba, is here. This is where the revolution is going to start, within this area. And if you notice in Cuba, there's a lot of different islands around Cuba, very large islands. They're around Cuba. And in fact, when we went there, there was a lot of underwater roads. So there were a lot of tunnels, and the tunnels ran under the sea. So when we were there, the person said to us that, "Do you know where you are?" We said, "We're under the tunnel." We thought that the tunnel was on land. They said, "No, the tunnel we're under the sea to go to another part of Cuba." And I believe that form of architecture and engineering stuff that they have is good, because we here in Jamaica, we don't have no tunnel that run under the sea. But they do. All right. With Cuba, there's a few things that we going to look at. The Cubans, from as early as 1492, and that's the year Christopher Columbus came to the Caribbean, arrived in the Caribbean. Cuba has been controlled by the Spanish, and the Spanish has ruled Cuba for quite a long time, from as early as 1492. In fact, when Christopher Columbus went to Cuba, he saw a lot of Taino Indians living in Cuba. So the Indians were there. They got rid of the Indians. They killed many of them. And the Spanish took over Cuba. And so that's one of the reasons why Cuba today actually speaks Spanish, because they actually were under Spanish rule from that early time. Now, Cuba produced quite a lot of things. The goods, they produce things like tobacco, they produce sugar, they produce coffee, they produce cocoa, right? A lot of different stuff that they produce in Cuba. and they used enslaved people in the early years for the production of sugar, cocoa, coffee, and other things. So the Spanish ruled Cuba for a pretty long time. And not only did the Spanish rule Cuba, but they used enslaved people in Cuba. This is after the indigenous people would have died. They brought in Africans from Africa, West Africa, to come into Cuba to work on their different plantations. Now, after a period of time, ladies, if you look right here, Florida for a very long time, what we know today as Florida, was also controlled by Spain. So Spain owned all of here, and they also owned Florida. After a period of time, America, the United States, when they form, once they got their independence, they are going to purchase Florida from the Spanish. That's what they are going to do. But for a very, very long time, the United States, they have an interest in this island. Why do you believe that the United States would have such a large interest in Cuba? Just look at it, look at the map. Why do you think they would have a large interest in Cuba?
So is it because it was bigger?
Repeat?
Like, is it because the country was big, like really big?
So one, Cuba is in fact the largest country in the Caribbean, island in the Caribbean. And so yes, because of its size, they were interested in it because of their size, but it was more than just their size. They were interested in it because of what? Look at Cuba and where Florida is. You have ever heard about West Keys in Florida?
No.
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
Yes. So the West Keys right here. Look how close it is to Havana.
Sir, its location?
Its location, yes. So the United States is very much interested at the time and still is interested in Cuba because Cuba location to the United States. In fact, if the United States has created quite a lot of enemies in the world, and a lot of people hate the United States for good and bad reasons. However, the United States needs to protect herself from people invading her territory. And so Cuba was very, very important to the United States for her security, because it is like less than 90 minutes by plane from Havana to Miami. Not a long time in terms of flight from Havana to Miami. It is very, very close. And so for a very long time, the United States, they were interested in Cuba. They were interested in Cuba because they wanted to use Cuba for production. And so the United States, for a very long time, after the Spanish left, so the Spanish left Cuba in 1898. That's when the Spanish left Cuba, 1898. And at that time, once the Spanish left, what they're going to do is that the Americans are going to go into Cuba and they are going to invest in Cuba. So what they are going to do, they are going to take over Cuba Electricity Company. They took, in fact, when we look at Cuba's electricity company at the time, the Americans owned over 90% of it. Also, the agricultural sector, they owned most of the sugar plantations there. And this is when the Spanish left. They went in and they took over a lot of different areas. They bought a lot of the lands on the coast and they built a lot of hotels and they controlled the beaches. And also the transportation sector, they would have also owned. They also owned the banks in Cuba, almost all the banks. They built the hospitals and they controlled the hospitals. They built airports and they controlled the airports. They built schools and they controlled the schools. So when you immediately after the Spanish left, the Americans controlled most of Cuba. Almost every aspect of Cuban life was controlled by the Americans. Any comment, ladies? Is the first time you're hearing about that? That the Americans used to own quite a lot of things in Cuba?
I've heard it mentioned in a couple like TV shows, but that's about it.
That's about it. So they owned a lot of things. So what happened is that, and I'm going to show it right here on my screen, is that the Spanish, for a very long time, the Taínos lived in Cuba. And then in 1492, Christopher Columbus he arrived in the Caribbean. And then he set this, and then the Spanish settled on Cuba. So the Spanish ruled Cuba from 1492 to 1898. That's a pretty long time. How many years that would be? Somebody do the calculation. 1898 minus 1492.
$406.
So 460 years.
60.
6?
6, sister, not
Yes, sir.
60.
406 years, the Spanish would have ruled Cuba. Quite a long time. Now, during this time, Cubans are wanted, and these are the Cubans who, the Spanish who lived in Cuba, or they were born in Cuba. So those Spanish who were born in Cuba were called the Creoles. And so they were basically the white Spanish people who were born in Cuba. And they owned a lot of things. So they owned like the plantations. They owned the plantations in Cuba. They owned almost everything. But those Creoles, they did not like the fact that Spain controlled Cuba. So the Creoles, they were upset with Spain control of Cuba. And so what they are going to do is that they are going to fight against Spain. They are going to fight against Spain because the Creoles, the very wealthy whites there, they didn't want Spain to continue to rule Cuba. And so they are going to have two wars to get rid of Spain from Cuba. The first one is called the 10 Years' War, right? So that was the first war, the 10 Years' War. So I'm going to tell you a little bit more about the 10 Years' War. So the 10 Years' War, that was the first war that took place. This was in 1868 to 1878. This was the first time that Cubans said, we are declaring ourselves independence and we do not want Spain to rule over Cuba. But because Spain was very, very powerful and Spain had a lot of military might and strength, what the Spain is going to do is that those Cubans are going to be defeated. Go ahead for me, Humes.
Oh, sir, I was asking to go back to the last page, the last slide you were on.
Which one is it? This one?
Sir, the one
That,
right before the, yes. Okay.
This one?
Thank you, sir.
All right. So with that now.
Okay, thank you, sir.
All right. So with that now, ladies, in 1868 to 78, they are going to declare themselves independence. Those persons who fought against Spain, they call themselves nationalists, meaning that they wanted to be independent from Spain. But again, after that, they are going to fight another war against Spain, which is called the Cuban War for Independence. And this war was between 1895 and 1898, right? So this was a very long time that they were fighting the war. Now, during this war, the Cubans said, we need to still get rid of Spain, but we need help. And so the United States is going to come to help Cuba to fight against Spain. And that's how Spain got their independence in 1898. They got their independence from Spain. Cuba got their independence from Spain in 1898. So note these 3 points. Between 1868 to 78, you had the 10 Years' War. Then the reason for the war was that Cuban wanted their independence. They lost that war, and then they are going to fight again in 1895 to 1898. And they realized that they were losing the war, so they asked for the US help. The US came and assisted them in 1898, and now the war is now going to be renamed the Spanish-American War. And in this war, the Americans, they are going to win the war. And once they win that war, then Cuba is going to get their independence. Following, ladies?
Yes, sir.
Sir.
All right, good. So we're not going to cover anything else from this. These are the very three points I want to leave with you. Now, when we return again, we need to look at some of the causes of the 10 Years' War. We're going to look at some of the causes of the Cuban War of Independence and what led the Americans to get involved in the war. And once the Americans got involved and Cuba received their independence, will the Americans leave Cuba to govern themselves? Or will they come in and be like another Spain and take over everything in Cuba? So these are some questions that we're going to ask ourselves when we return. All right, ladies? Enjoy the weekend.
Thank you, sir, and same to you.
All right, bye-bye.
Goodbye,
Bye.
sir.
Thank you, sir.
Bye, sir. Enjoy your weekend.
Bye-bye.
Bye, sir.